Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Daily Brentford Podcast with myself, Daniel, where today we'll be looking back on the 1-1 stalemate at the Gtech against Everton on Wednesday night. Just before we get going, guys, we're a brand new company, so we're looking forward for your support now in the coming season and beyond as we look to bring you the best and most in-depth coverage across the entire network. Whether this is a 5-star review on your favourite podcasting platform or a recommendation to your friends, we are very grateful for any support that we are able to receive. So let's get straight stuck into it. And the key piece of team news pre-game, which became apparent after the last episode was recorded, was that Norgard had indeed suffered a concussion following the challenge by Koulibaly at Leicester on Friday night. It is a little bit surprising to me that he continued. Obviously, Brentford would have got a concussion substitute out of it, particularly if he was taking off in that first half. Usually it's not it's not normal for a player to continue after suffering a concussion. The consequences could be potentially serious, but it seemed that his condition deteriorated over half time during that game, and he missed out in this one. That meant Bioniq came in with Jensen also out injured, and I thought he did a good job. I think you can see in terms of Yarmo his technical quality. I think at times, as a footballer, as a young and raw footballer, he perhaps looks a little bit better than Janelt. I think given Janelt's experience and his number of games at Premier League level and his tactical know-how, I think that's what usually favours him above the likes of Yarmo. But I think he stepped in well and did a good job in what was a very, very tough game. What I would say, though, out of the three of them, when you're talking about Norgard, Janelt and Yarmo, I think Norgard is the most important. And I think any game without Norgard in is a challenge. I think we look so much better with him in the team. So it was a big loss nevertheless. Coming on to that, and with Yarmo coming into the team, I think, again, we looked like we had a lack of depth and options on the bench. It was only a few weeks ago where things are improving on that front, and now, given that there's a week and a half until our next fixture, I hope it will improve again. It's difficult in these types of games. I think it's manageable against the likes of Leicester, where we can bring young players on with half an hour to go, where we can rest some of the usual 11, and when everything's going our way and we don't need to necessarily change the game in the way that we perhaps needed to here. I think it's very difficult for the likes of Thomas Frank in that second half to really change the game, particularly when Everton equalised and we needed another goal. But what I would say is perhaps what he could have done is brought Fabio Carvalho on, and I think it's another tight game where we needed a goal, reminiscent at times in that second half of Spurs at home a few weeks ago, and Fabio Carvalho does not get on. He does not get an opportunity to prove himself in a big game. I think it's one thing bringing him on at 3-0 up when everything's going your way on Friday night against Leicester. He got a goal, he got a bit of confidence out of that, hopefully, but I think for him to really prove himself and, really move up the pecking order in the side, as difficult it is with Damsgaard ahead of him, I think he really needs to be given opportunities in this type of game where perhaps we're struggling to get over the line, where perhaps we need a little bit of magic to get us over the line. And I think it would have been that game where, I thought he should have come on. I thought when Magoma came on and we conceded within 2 minutes of him coming on for Sharda, I thought at that point perhaps Magoma can drop deeper alongside Janelt, and someone like Yarmo, who's on a yellow card, could make way, and you can have Carvalho in and around Damsgaard and see what we can do, see if that sparks something else in us creatively. And it's something I've raised before about Thomas Frank. Carvalho, how are we meant to expect him to step up and become, what Damsgaard is now if we don't give him those opportunities in these games? Because even the last few seasons, when the likes of Damsgaard and Keane Lewis-Potter weren't in the team every week, they were still getting some substantial minutes in different games and the odd start here and there. So I feel a little bit for Carvalho. He's a £15 to £20 million signing. He left Liverpool in search of Premier League football. He hasn't really got that here. You could argue that perhaps he'd be involved in, some match day squads at Liverpool. So has he really taken a step forward in his career in terms of playing time at Brentford? I'm not sure he can say he has right now. But I do hope we do see him soon, because, that must be what we brought him in for. So it's a little bit of a shame to see, and it's a little bit frustrating on that front. What I would say as well is Michael Coyote, should we be seeing him start a game soon? We will talk about Ethan Pinnock in this podcast, but with him looking like he might be slowing down, and if Vandenberg is still going to be out for a couple of weeks, would we think of doing something like moving Christopher Ayer across, giving Coyote a start at right back, and obviously what he can do going forward? We've all seen that in terms of his long throws, in terms of his ability to get down the line and put crosses in the box. And defensively, I'm sure in training he's been working on defensive positioning and the tactical setup of the team. So it's something I would like to see perhaps over the next few weeks, even though we've got some difficult games coming up. In regards to Everton, they were quite solid as expected. I expected this to be a difficult game, and they were very good, actually. Perhaps even better, slightly better than I thought they'd be. Certainly a big jump from how they were under David Moyes. The likes of Jake O'Brien at right back were able to nullify Kevin Schade aerial threat, which he normally has success on against the opposition's right back. But, Jake O'Brien, I think he's a centre back by trade, and you can tell the size of him, even compared to the likes of Tarkowski and Branthwaite, who make for a very mean back line. Alcaraz, again, I didn't mention him in the preview, but I thought he was a good player. I think he's the same player that was at Southampton a couple of years ago when they got relegated, and I think he was one of their standout players during that season. I think he's a good player. Decore was missing out as a result of his wife giving birth, so we got away with one there on top of the absences that we spoke about in the preview episode. Beto started up front, got in great positions, as we'll also go on to discuss. If there is any way to bring him down from the confident streak he was on, I think he may have been having nightmares about a certain Mr. Flecken last night. But as I said, we'll get on to all of that. First of all, though, we'll go to a break, and in part two, we will summarise how the game played out.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Your body is unique. And Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bioniq, the world's most personalised supplements. Bioniq provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right level to optimise your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bioniq. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now.
Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to part two of your daily Brentford podcast, analysing the stalemate against Everton at the Gtech in midweek. On this particular occasion, I thought Brentford started the game brightly. Both teams, you could tell that Everton were going to be harder to break down than some of our recent opponents, i.e. Leicester the other night. I thought very early on, we looked dynamic. We looked like we was creating chances in different ways. It didn't last the whole 90 minutes, but just a couple of moments of note. Kevin Schade going on a brilliant run on that left-hand side, beating 3 or 4 players, but unable to find the finish or that pass into Johan Wissa. If that had gone in, I think that would have been one of our best goals of the season, just on how Sharda got into the position he got into and the dribbling that we saw from him. And that was the confident, fearless Sharda that we want to see more and more often, and perhaps we don't see too consistently. It looked like he was very confident at getting at O'Brien. I don't know whether that is because he is a centre-back by trade and he felt, more agile and able to go around him easier. But that is something I want to see from Kevin Sharda moving forward. We also had the Wissa header from the Kevin Sharda cross. Didn't quite get the power or trajectory that he would have liked. I think normally Johan Wissa, for someone who's not the tallest of players, he's decent in those areas. Didn't get the power on the cross. It was a little bit of a floated cross, so perhaps a bit more difficult to do. But then as the game progressed, as Brentford did not take those early chances, albeit, they weren't massive chances, then came the big scares. Beto going through one-on-one on 2 occasions in quick succession. The first arising from an Ethan Pinnock slip, and I was very, very worried that when Ethan went tumbling and Beto kind of tumbled over him as well, I was very worried that he could potentially get sent off in that situation. I think if Beto doesn't get up, the referee's got a decision to make. There is contact. It wasn't intentional at all from Ethan Pinnock, given that he just fell. But I think, judging by the rules of the game, if he's through on goal, denial of a goal scoring opportunity, I think Ethan Pinnock would have seen red there. And I think most strikers who aren't Beto may have stayed down and tried to call for it. And I think it would have been difficult and a sticky situation for Ethan Pinnock to get back from if that was the case, because ultimately he was through on goal. And it's only the fact that he went on to get up again, have that big chance, that there was no denial of a goal scoring opportunity. The second one, I guess with the first one, you could say that, players slip over sometimes. I saw a few Brentford players in that first half in particular slip over off the ball, which is a bit frustrating. Of course, defenders slipping over in particular often results in big chances, especially when it leaves someone one-on-one. So it was a little bit concerning that we saw a bit of that here and there in the first half. The second one, though, I thought, again, Pinnock was caught. Nathan Collins had gone ahead to contest the aerial ball, didn't win it. But then Pinnock's got to stay in his defensive line. And the fact that Pinnock goes to try and engage an Everton attacker, but doesn't get there either. He ends up in the middle of nowhere almost. And Beto's through again. I thought it was sad to see, actually. It's sad to see Ethan Pinnock perhaps in decline, perhaps becoming a bit slower and sluggish. We saw it again in the second half that we'll go on to talk about. This was perhaps the game for me where it was really confirmed that he is slowing down. I think it reminded me of a game that Ben Mee had against Chelsea, I think last season. It shows how quickly it can happen. It was only a couple of years ago that Ben Mee was our player of the season, and then last year he dropped off, and again it's happened again. Ethan Pinnock, Fran's player of the season last year, so consistent, so brilliant every week. Definitely the one that outshone all the other centre-backs last season. And this season, Nathan Collins has grown so much, and Ethan Pinnock is really quite struggling. It's sad to see. He's done a lot for the club. I can't criticise him. He's had injuries this season as well, and we don't know how they've affected him. He's into his 30s, and maybe things are just starting to catch up for him. But, he started his career at the very lowest levels of the game and ended up in the Premier League for Brentford, being a massive part of the side in that time. So if, that is the end of him being at his best, then I'm sure every Brentford fan out there is very, very grateful for him. But then up stepped, despite Beto being through twice, up stepped Mark Flecken, the second one in particular, a brilliant save to deflect the ball wide. And this is what we've been asking for Flecken. He kept us in the game. Ultimately, he was the reason why we came out of the game with a point. And, he's been criticised at times for his perhaps one-on-one ability, perhaps going down too easily. But he stood up to the test here, and, it's credit to him. And, he really deserves that point, and he was a massive part in us getting that point. And I think it's underestimated just how many saves he's had to make this season. Even if a lot of the shots have been from quite far out, he's still got to make those saves. And I think with Mark Flecken in goal, I have that sense of feeling quite comfortable with him there generally again, which is the same feeling I had when David Raya was between the sticks, and we didn't necessarily get in the first 3 to 6 months of Flecken's Brentford career. So yeah, another hugely confidence boosting night for him if he needed it at all. And of course, following those chances just before the break, we got the goal. This came from a Kevin Schade long throw, which Everton allowed to bounce. And I think once you allow a long throw to bounce in the box, you're asking for trouble to an extent. You know, the amount of tall defenders that Everton have, it shouldn't be bouncing in their own 6-yard area. Brian and Bumo perhaps should have scored with the first attempt hitting the bar, and then Wissa came absolutely flying in. Great desire, great intent, great instincts, goal-scoring instincts, and that's why he's got so many goals, and that's why he's on his best individual Premier League season in terms of goals for Brentford, and it was brilliant to see. And it's the perfect time to score, and at the break, kind of get the sense that things were going our way for once. And, you know, a lot of Brentford fans would probably tell you that doesn't happen very often, you know, with the Beto missed opportunities, and, you know, with the Worcester goal at the perfect opportunity at the perfect time, you know, fans would have been forgiven for thinking that it would be our day and that things were just going our way today, of which of course wasn't the case. Everton did come back into it in the second half, but yeah, in general, I thought it was a good first half. If you take away those two better opportunities, then you would have classed as the better team. But, you know, you've got to take those into account. They were massive opportunities, and perhaps we were a bit lucky to go into the break 1-0 up. In terms of other chances, we still went close as well. I think just before his goal, where he forced a save out of Pickford, and it just shows the variety of finishes Wissa has. You know, this one was a curling effort from the edge of the box. He can do that too. And he can also do the more scrappy stuff, which happened when we scored the goal. Let's go into the second half then. I didn't think this is as good, unfortunately. I thought we dropped off a bit, and it's difficult sometimes to maintain such a level against a top Premier League side. And I think Everton over the last 7-8 games have shown themselves to be performing at a level of a top half side, and I think it showed in the second half. We got a bit of a scare early on when a corner from Jack Harrison seemed to, I think it may have hit the near post. It's not even really clear from the replays, but it bounced across the goal. It was cleared by Schade. I think in those situations, and it's something we've normally been good at this season, we need to be perhaps a little bit more commanding, and not allow those situations to happen, because if a Everton player got their foot to it or got their head to it, you know, we would have been in real danger here. Everton perhaps were slightly on top in terms of territory and domination, but Brentford did have an absolutely massive chance to win it with about 15 minutes to go on the clock. Keane Lewis-Potter rounds the keeper from a brilliant, exquisite ball back across from Mikael Damsgaard, once again seeing things that most players wouldn't see. Most players would not recognise that pass was on, and just like the assist against Leicester the other day, brilliant ball into Keane Lewis-Potter. He almost does the hard bit. He takes it round Jordan Pickford, but then decides to pass to Wissa. Doesn't slot it home himself, which I think he should do. And, you know, a confident Keane Lewis-Potter who is perhaps in the goals and scores more goals more often would perhaps do that. And then we had some confusion from certain fans, I won't name any, on social media. Of course, this was offside because you have to have two players behind the ball. Everton only had one. It wasn't the goalkeeper. Obviously, Jordan Pickford in this situation counts as one of those two players. In any situation, he would count as one of those two players. But he was ahead of the ball, so it would have required another Everton player to be between Wissa and the goal line for the goal to stand. And it was a clear offside, very obviously offside. You know, Keane Lewis-Potter again, could he have shown more awareness? You know, he knew he had just gone round Pickford. He could only see one defender on the goal line. He's got to be finishing that himself. He must be knowing that Wissa's offside. So that's disappointing, and I guess that's the big frustration from the game. You know, we conceded big chances ourselves, but that was also a big chance. And if we had scored that and had gone 2-0 up with 10, 12 minutes left, then, you know, it probably would have been, I would like to think it would have been a very different finish to the game. It then kind of became a game of crosses, and a lot of them didn't quite connect. It's always difficult when Brentford get into that pattern against teams like Everton, with three centre-backs essentially in the back four, all going to be favourites to the ball ahead of the likes of Brian and Mbeumo and Johan Wissa, particularly when Kevin Schade had come off the pitch. So that was a bit frustrating. That's why I wanted someone like Fabio Carvalho to come in and offer something a bit different, try and be a bit more intricate at the patterns of play, a bit more creative, and I think that's just what we lacked to get that second goal. And then Everton got what they probably deserved. Jake O'Brien in for his first goal for the club. Keane Lewis Potter, I don't know what he's doing at this cross. He seems to get dragged right across the goal, marking a man, further across than Ethan Pinnock. So if he's coming in there, Ethan Pinnock needs to drop out to the left back area. He needs to be monitoring Jake O'Brien. And ultimately, though, I don't think Keane Lewis Potter should be putting anyone in that situation. He should be leaving the player drifting across goal to the likes of Collins and Ethan Pinnock, and he needs to be dealing with his man in his area of the pitch. And I thought it was very harsh on Paris Magoma, who is left at the far post alone with Jake O'Brien, who thumped home. What I would have liked to see from Magoma is maybe a little bit more effort in trying to stop the ball from going in, going up for the header with O'Brien. I know he's very, very unlikely to come out on top in that battle, just given the size of O'Brien, but, just do it a bit more to try and put him off. But he doesn't really challenge for it, and it's quite a simple goal from Everton's point of view. And then it could have got worse. Beto ran through again, and I think this one perhaps was the worst of the lot from Ethan Pinnock. It looked like he had a head start on Beto. I don't know whether Beto's just really quick or Ethan Pinnock is really losing his place completely. Probably a bit of both, but again, Ethan Pinnock not managed to get there first. So many times over the years we've seen him in that situation, and he does get there first. If it's Nathan Collins now, you'd expect him to get him there first, but Mark Flecken to the rescue yet again. I think Ethan Pinnock owes him a drink or two after this one. Another good save, standing up strong, tipping it wide. And if Beto was in a confident spree, as I mentioned before the game, he may well not be now following this experience. Vitaly Janelt in the last minute was Brentford's only other real chance of note. A long throw from Michael Coyote, as we know he can do. He does throw it a lot further than the likes of Kevin Schade. Caused a bit of chaos again. Air kick at the back post from Vitaly Janelt on his favoured left foot. If he gets contact on that, who knows what could have been. But I think ultimately, in the end, I thought we were lucky to come out of a point potentially, given I would say the best three of the best four chances of the game fell to Everton, with the other one being the Keane Lewis Potter Wissa offside goal. I think maybe at best it's a fair result. I think on another day, another striker, Mark Flecken, not in such good form. We go 2 or 3-0 down here, and it's very, very difficult against a side like Everton, who are very difficult to beat. They can be fairly defensive, they can time waste, they can frustrate you. I think it would have been very difficult to come back if we went behind in this one. But that leaves Brentford then with one more point. But then is that still enough, you think, in terms of our aspirations of a potential European place? I still think we need to do slightly more against the better sides if we're to be in that European conversation. It kind of reminds me a little bit of those championship years where we were stuck between 9th and 11th for a few years. Always with about 10 to 15 games to go, we'd be about 6 or 7 points outside the playoffs, but always it felt like it was a little bit too much at that stage in the season, too big of a gap to overcome. We'd need to be too consistent to get into those places, because in reality, the top 6 or 7 in the Premier League do win a fair few games. And can I see us now outscoring 3 of them, catching them up and overtaking 3 of them in the next 11 games of our fixtures coming up too? I'm not so sure, but we can prove Brentford can prove me wrong, hopefully in the next few weeks, given that we've got a lot of the clubs in and around us fighting for that European space, both at the Gtech and away from home in the next few weeks. So it's a point on the board, not a bad point, but I think in terms of where we want to be, perhaps you can also say it's 2 points dropped. That will do for today anyway. Thank you for listening to the Daily Brentford podcast. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. And once again, we'd be extremely grateful for your support, as this will enable us to go bigger and better moving forwards. Daily Brentford can be found on X, Instagram and TikTok under the handle at GSPN Brentford. And this podcast is also now available on YouTube on the Global Sports Podcast Network account. No game this weekend, so we'll be back again next week as we look ahead to our next game at the Gtech against Aston Villa. Another big one against a potential European challenger and the nearest team to us in the table, of whom we also have a game in hand over them. So until then, from myself, thank you for being with me.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.